Well, over the last 24 hours, we've also learned that police investigating the Grenfell Tower fire say that they have, quote, reasonable grounds to suspect that corporate manslaughter offences may have been committed. Joseph Kotrie-Monson is a senior criminal defence lawyer who's advised in corporate manslaughter cases in the past. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So can you tell us what corporate manslaughter actually means? What may the results be? What may the penalties be?
Okay, well, I think, first of all, there are broadly two types of prosecution that can be brought in the UK after a catastrophic accidental death or deaths. The first port of call must actually be gross negligence manslaughter, which historically was the position until 2007 when this new legislation was corporate manslaughter came in under John Reid, the then Home Secretary. To get a conviction for gross negligence manslaughter, which can be charged against individuals who can face prison sentences, the prosecution have to prove that a certain individual had a duty of care to the deceased, that they specifically breached that duty grossly, and that means so much essentially as for it to be a criminal breach, and that duty was a cause of the deaths. And again, the maximum sentence on conviction is life, although in reality sentences in double figures are perhaps rare. The problem with this, and the reason for corporate manslaughter, is that gross negligence manslaughter is sometimes hard to prove because sometimes it is a failure of the system of safety and the way that an organisation is put together in its totality, rather than a specific individual controlling what's going on, which has actually contributed to the death. But a court will always look as to whether there has been a key decision maker who had the power to prevent the dangerous situation which contributed to the death. But the easier path, of course, it's of less satisfaction to the public because you're going after an organisation, and organisations and companies corporate bodies can't go to prison, is to look at the second type of prosecution, which, as you say rightly, corporate manslaughter, and that's what the police have announced yesterday. Now, that was an offence created under the Corporate Manslaughter and Corporate Homicide Act, as I said a few years ago. And in that time, there have only been 24 successful prosecutions, but they take some putting together.
And so how long might this investigation take?
We are talking about, even with the resources that the Met will be diverting to this, and the CPS and the Health and Safety Executive, if they're as usual involved, we're talking about months. I mean, the interesting thing with this offence is that the offence doesn't require that it be proved exactly who it was in an organisation who dropped the ball, more that there was a failure at management level, and then it resulted. I think the problem, of course, is that this offence has the teeth of a fine against an organisation. You know, this fine could well be, in this case, although the record at the moment under this relatively new legislation is only 1.2 million, one might expect rightly that the fine, if there is a conviction of anybody here, could result into the tens of millions. I think the question, of course, is will that really satisfy the public who are so outraged by what's happened?
Well, not only will it not perhaps satisfy the public, but if we're talking tens of millions of pounds of a fine for a local council, it's the residents who are paying. Again, it's the taxpayer that's paying again.
Absolutely. But these things are, of course, as a warning to other councils. These are a warning to the other organisations rather than just as a bill for a taxpayer. But it's a point that you rightly make.
Just to be clear, and Richard's got in touch with us, Joseph, on the text, and I know you've touched on this, but he said, though the police may have evidence of corporate manslaughter, that does not preclude prosecution and imprisonment of individuals if they are found to be criminally negligent. Is that correct?
I'm studiously avoiding talk of gross negligence manslaughter at this stage, precisely because the police have. There may well be strategic reasons. They're not naming that at this stage, that we probably shouldn't go into. I can say this, of those 24 prosecutions for corporate manslaughter, most of them, successful prosecutions for corporate manslaughter, most of them were accompanied side by side in the same trial by trials of the directors, company officers or managers. Most of them resulted in convictions for them too for gross negligence manslaughter and prison sentences.
Joseph, thank you very much. That's Joseph Kotrie-Monson, who's a senior criminal defence lawyer.